Happy Sunday morning, everybody. I am joined by Ethan Indigo. Ethan, tell them what you are up to.
Well, salute. Good Sunday to everyone. Headless, always glad to be here with you. Hopefully, we'll get Ricardo back soon. And yeah, I've been working on an article for our great nation's 250th anniversary, and trying to be critical and inspiring at the same time in it. I think that's what the world needs is some critical analytics and some inspiration, not just this country. And yes, always putting together little things based on the sacred geometry ideas and so forth. And yeah, easy to find online. Ethan Indigo on all the social media. Appreciate everybody.
Awesome. Definitely check out his books too. Well, let's look up what I wanted to bring up today was the idea of it's called star skipping, I believe, star hopping.
Hmm,
Let me see. It's
not
a
familiar.
Taoist concept that it's called Bugong. And Bugong is the Taoist ritual dance or walk based upon the Yubu, Steps of Yu tradition, in which a Taoist priest paces through a supernatural pattern, such as the stars in the Big Dippers or numbers in Lushu Magic Square. Text from the 4th century Shangqing school revelations contain the earliest disciplines of Bugong, frequently with the practitioner pacing among constellations. This is what brought to mind the labyrinths of Europe, where they're walking through these constructed labyrinths or mazes on the ground as a form of meditation. So, specifically, they talk about the Big Dipper, and the Big Dipper is so vitally important to understand, the rotation of the sky during the different seasons, that I think, the Big Dipper here is being used in this sort of a pacing guideline, right? Have you ever heard of this, Ethan?
Not this. No. Actually, I know that in Taoism in China that the Big Dipper is highly revered. As you describe the ritual of going through a maze, it reminds me of what kind of is suggested in many of the ancient world of the West, Egypt and Greece, right? That they may have been doing similar things, but we don't have it so concrete as here.
Right. And, I think maybe there could be a kind of integration where you can let me see if I can pull up a labyrinth. You can make a labyrinth and then include the constellations in it, right? And maybe have seasonal guides for it. So as the sun is coming up in these different constellations, there could be a increased amount of energy in there. But we were talking yesterday with this guy, the Thunder Wizard, and he was talking a little bit about these different spirits of the land and how the spirits of the land are connected to these portals. And I was thinking, you just combine all of these ideas together in some sort of a, what are those called? The glyphs that you put onto the land that you walk through. Well, one of them is the labyrinth, but let me see if I can pull some up.
There is also in Tibet they have a meditative practice of it's a deep meditation, apparently, where they can run extraordinary distances, and it's said you never disturb a running monk, because
Mm,
they're totally in a trance state and they're carrying a knife because they're kind of expecting to interact with a wild animal that is inspired to chase them. So you just get out of their way because they're totally tranced out.
Interesting. Yeah, so if I was going to integrate the constellations into a labyrinth work, you've got different types of stones that you could use, or painting the stones to represent the stars on these different labyrinths. So if you're going to sort of be an integrationist and use this Taoist concept as well as the Western concept of the labyrinth, you could put the stones in different formations within the labyrinth to create the constellations, which I'm thinking would be a fun project.
Well,
I found
and
out. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Egypt, I think, is an example where the cities are designed in a way that actually mirror constellations, right?
Mm,
Down the Nile.
exactly.
So this is a really big correspondence magic ritual in a sense, right? It's like bringing together the high and the low.
Right. Well, I found out the other day that there's actually a megalithic park in a city near me that I never knew existed. So I'm definitely going to go visit. Maybe make some videos as soon as it opens. But it's open May through October.
Hmm.
Right. So I was thinking that sounds like a good field trip.
What's it called?
Let's look it up. Let me see. Kinstone Megalithic Garden, Wisconsin Stonehenge. Look at
Oh
that.
wow, look at that. Very neat.
Got
Well,
that
so this
one
is
in
a
there.
private build by someone.
Yes, sir. Look
Very
at
cool.
that. And
I
that's
mean,
actually
isn't this
really
probably
close to me.
everyone's fantasy? Like, I know I
Right.
always buy a property and build a megalithic circle and things like that. That's epic.
Yeah, this is like a massive sculpture garden of megaliths. And, again, I'm sure that it is very connected to um, you know, uh, the constellations as well.
Mm.
So again, they've got this labyrinth in there. This is pretty standard when you're talking about these type of megalithic structures. They like to include the labyrinth, but also look, they might have these other stones connected to those stars, and the connection between stones and stars, I think, is very fascinating because they're connecting the earth to the heavens, right? And if you could do that in accordance with certain postures that you're putting your body in, you might actually get a much different thing going on. So I'm
Mm.
definitely going to check this out and bring it back for the tribe. So you
It's
know,
arguable
um,
that is the very well. Jin could correct me or build on this if he were here listening. But tantra is itself a kind of mechanism of bringing together. Tantra is kind of this unity practice, right? It could be sexual, but it's not necessarily. Where you um, with certain asana postures, as you just mentioned, and certain mantra vocalizations, and certain meditative positions, you can really kind of change your inner and maybe even the outer.
right. Well, where this is interesting too. So this is like the edge of the driftless, they call it in Wisconsin. So the driftless is an area of mountainous, extrusions from the ground that were not scraped off by the massive ice age glaciers that kind of scrape the rest of the state flat. So, and the driftless is right around the Mississippi River too. So it was like separating the Mississippi from these massive glaciers. So it's in a really interesting area as well. So it's got a lot going for it. So I can't wait to go. When I found out about this, it's like I'm planning my visit.
Yeah, no doubt.
Ooh, they got a Moonstone Archway. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun. Hopefully, you guys enjoy it. I can't wait to go. But just around the corner, once May comes around, I'm going. I'm going on the opening.
Dope.
I'd love to do lectures and stuff out there too. I don't know if they'll allow me to, but that would be awesome.
That would be a great location for a lecture get together of any sort. Yeah.
Indeed, indeed. So let's see. What was I going to? So, what do you think about the Taoist practice? Is that something that interests you as well?
Well, I mean, I could be accused of being a Taoist as I practice Tai Chi every day and other different meditations, even. I have not really focused on anything as esoteric as that. I guess my Taoist kind of relationship is always trying to change myself, but also it's a paradox in the sense that I kind of think of pursuing my practice and maybe magic too, with the idea that attention is the opposite of intention, or tension, even. So attention is the opposite of tension. And when you have intention, it kind of has the tendency to cause glitches or holding patterns, or in respect to like the Tao Te Ching, when you grasp it, it slips through your hands. And this it being an idea or energy or any number of things. When you're constantly grasping and seizing, it falls away. So that's kind of an example of bringing attention and having open hands and being open to the harmony of the Tao, rather than having the intention to even to be in harmony with the Tao or anything. It tends to be like when you have intention, you're trying to hold a ball of water, or grasp rather a ball of water. So yeah, I have not done too many of the more esoteric, you know, magic in a sense. Although I think maybe it is kind of part and parcel with it. In what I mean by that is that when you practice qigong or tai chi, qigong, the definition of qigong actually is important to maybe understand this. It's working out our qi, development of our qi, and Tai Chi Chuan is a qigong. Not all qigongs are Tai Chi Chuan, and by that it's a self-development hobby. Gung Fu, same idea, same word format. It is a self-development hobby. The Fu is like the Qi in that phrase, whereas with Qigong we work out our Qi, our essences, our oxygen essence, you might kind of think of it as. And whereas Gung Fu or Fu Gong, it would be working out our self-development itself, as a process. There's, I was thinking how wonderful Taoism and primal Taoism is in helping me interpret other symbological references. One particularly recently that came up is in Egypt we have Tahuti, or then Thoth, and then Hermes, and so on and so forth. And Tahuti himself has nothing to do with thievery. With Hermes, he is actually the god of thieves. And so how does that make sense? What does that mean? This guy is the great bringer of wisdom and so forth. And so some might think of this as being a perversion, but it may have been, that lesson may be perverted, but I think the unperverted lesson is that in that is revealed to me in this little uh, allegory in Chinese, from China rather. There's a young man who's coming of age, and he lives in a poor village, and he himself is not wealthy, and is trying to figure out what to do in life to survive and get money. And he's observing the town, and there are one or two individuals, one in particular, that is very well off, and he eventually goes to this guy and he says, how do you do it? How do you get all this stuff and all this money? And he says, oh, I steal it all. And he says, I'm a thief, I steal it. And he goes, what? And kind of decides to upon by himself to become a thief, and he steals from the people in the village, and he gets arrested and jailed, and comes back, after years of being in trouble. They let him out. He goes back to that guy, and he's really angry. He says, you're horrible. You told me to steal, and I did, and I got in trouble. And he said, what? No, I said become a thief. Everything you see in here, I stole. I stole the turtles in the spring. I stole the deer in the summer and the autumn, and I harvested the mushrooms. And he goes on and on about how nothing is ours, right? We are literally harvesting from Gaia, if you will. We're stealing from Gaia. And even knowledge and wisdom, where do you get it? You have to, in effect, steal it, right? And so I think that is the lesson. For instance, where he this Tahuti Hermes relationship, where he's identified with the thieves. It's that type of theft.
Well, in the Orphic hymn, in certain translations, I've heard Hermes talked about as the loosener and the source of gain. So to me, that brings up the idea of the coin purse, right? And so one man's loosened coin purse is another man's found coins. So he's both the loosener and the source of gain. So when it comes to Hermes and Thoth, you could see how there's a linkage there, because for knowledge to be learned, it must first be shared. And for that knowledge to be shared, you kind of have to loosen the tongue of the person who has that knowledge. So there is that idea there too. It's the crossing of boundaries, and the Ptolemaic period was one of massive integration between both the Egyptian and Greek pantheons, and in that sort of unification, Hermes, the messenger of the gods, he carries the information from on high down to the low, right? So from that sort of angelic trip from the mountain of the gods, the ultimate source of wisdom, the ultimate source of all of this understanding, down to the low, you can kind of see how Hermes could, also be a thief, right, of this eternal knowledge, bringer to mortal men.
And it's that duality, that paradox of giving and taking, right? Of obtaining. You have to obtain to give, and yeah, nothing in effect is ours in this realm.
Right. And that it puts Hermes at a much more ancient level when you've created the two synthesis there. And it's one of the most talked about syntheses in history is Hermes Trismegistus, right? And so the blending of Thoth and Hermes is like all of these sacred texts that are, immortal wisdom, right? And this is really the defining point of Hermeticism. And so that immortal wisdom, I think, is what they're going for with all of this syncretism. Is it's a primordial thought again, like thought itself comes from the idea of Thoth. And so to syncretize, it's like Thoth holds the library and Hermes is the one who steals it. So on some level, you could see
Right.
how that would
Yeah.
be a nice synthesis for unlocking that knowledge. And I think all religious formulations before Christianity were done out of a deep understanding or a reverence to these unspeakable truths. You know, it's something before language, it's something before the ability to communicate. I look at it like this. So, animals could all possibly be having deep existential thoughts and deep existential crises that they can't communicate.
Sure.
And in some way, I think that's the source of religion, is because all of these, if you look at elephants that, revere their dead, or, chimpanzees that worship at waterfalls, they're expressing something that is so deeply held within them that it's almost impossible to communicate, at least on a level that we would understand. And maybe all animals have those thoughts at times. Maybe all animals are connected to that sort of deep existential being. And so, what we view as our religious expressions could be coming from a much more deeper primordial source. If you believe in evolution and all that, you're sort of channeling the deep existential crises of our animal ancestors, which is kind of a scary thing to think about. But I know my cat has deep existential thoughts. He's unable to fully communicate. There's this great picture I got of him. He likes to look at me in the mirror while I'm doing dishes. Let me see if I can pull that up. But you can tell there's something happening within his mind that is not fully able to be expressed. Where's my downloads? Here we go. That's the one. Now I gotta share it. It's so weird. Like, my camera will take pictures in a format that can't be put onto the thing without changing the format. And it's like they're
Your,
both
your
iPhone
computer
products,
takes pictures that don't work with your computer.
right? And they're both the same brand. So go figure. Stop screen. Share screen. Here we go. So he's having some interesting thoughts here, right? He's seeing something in the mirror at me, knowing that he's looking in the mirror at me. And so he's got sort of a self-awareness thing going on. He's he's doing this specifically because sometimes I'll hold him up in front of the mirror and point at him. And in some ways, this is him pointing back at me in the mirror.
Right.
I'm not sure exactly what's going on inside of his head, but I can tell you that's probably not normal behavior on the level that we think, cats have consciousness. So he's probably thinking a lot more than we give him credit for.
Yeah, I think we've kind of disgraced ourselves by presuming in the last many hundreds of years that animals can't do certain things and can't think certain things. And in fact, I
I think
think they
we've
can.
we've overclassified, right? We don't know what's going on inside animals' heads because they can't communicate it, right? But we do see that there's a lot of coordination going on within nature, and different species coordinate on levels. Like the squirrels will warn the surrounding animals when they spot a predator in the sky, like a hawk or an eagle, right? So they'll be up in the trees screaming their heads off whenever there's a predator around. You've all heard the iconic bark of a squirrel. That's to warn not just their own, but to warn everything else. Now, sometimes these unscrupulous little bastards will bark and warn all of the birds away from the bird seed so that they themselves can get in there and actually steal some of it. So I think all communication is a form of manipulation. on some level, which goes back to the thief idea of Hermes. You
Right.
know, if we're using language as a manipulation, and that is one of the purposes of communication in the first place, what does that say about philosophy? Everybody who speaks has an agenda.
This reminds me of two studies that have been done by really reputable universities. One that summarized babies as young as 8 months start to deceive and lie. Another one was it basically used a toy going up a track, like a toy train type of thing, going up a hill and then back down. And the kids were shown that another toy would interfere with this going uphill. And the kids had empathy, and they kind of used this as a way to gauge their empathy for things going uphill. And all of them at a young age had more empathy for this thing going uphill. As they got older, they had less. And this is in like the first couple of years of older type of thing. But I think it was like up to 4 years old youngsters that were in this experiment, maybe less than that, 3 even. And they used this experiment to gauge their empathy essentially, and it decreased the longer they were here. And so I wonder, I feel like empathy and maybe morality are sort of like we're born with it. And then we learn that there are certain things that are tolerated that we can get away with. It would seem by 8 months. we learn that people are lying and deceiving each other. Like we belittle animals' consciousness, and we also belittle the fact that young people are learning so much by observation and not necessarily by direct instruction.
Right? There are actually really good creativity experiments being done in public schools, right? So, research and experiments suggest that creativity significantly declines in children as children progress through public school education system. While young children often test at genius levels for divergent thinking, these scores typically plummet by the time they reach high school and adulthood. The NASA Land study in 1968, George Land and Beth Jarman used divergent thinking tests originally for NASA on 1,600 preschoolers. So, what this test consists of is you're given an object or you're given a concept, and then they're told to say what that concept is doing or how it's interacting, right? And so they've got this list, this huge list of massively creative ideas going on with this object, right? And so, it's all of these different, topics that they've come up with, or these different narratives that they've come up with for this object. It doesn't matter what they are; it's just a list, right? Ages 5, 98 scored at the creative genius level. Age 10, this dropped to 30%. 15 to 12%. Adults, only 2% of the 280,000 adults scored at the same level. Non-creative behavior is learned often through the constraints of conventional education. Maybe that's the goal.
Yeah, well, I think it was Franklin Roosevelt. A quote that's been on my mind recently is things happen in the world. Something to the effect of, if anything happens in politics, you could bet it was planned that way. And so I think you and I, in a 5-minute little bit of research about education, have looked into really a factual result of what is going on. And we can presume that smarter and more institutionalized people have been measuring such for 80 plus years. they know what's going on. And so like Roosevelt said, you can bet it was made to happen that way.
Right? Well, I think you can't. So creativity is associated with problem solving. And if you have the ability to creatively solve your problems and, do so effectively, that is a more powerful skill than any of the other written, memorized
Absolutely.
forms of knowledge that you get from the public education system. So the emphasis on rote memorization instead of having a co-emphasis on creative problem solving, I think is a huge problem. But to tell that to a teacher that has their own outline and their own creative,
Or most of the teachers, they may have their own outline, but they're required to follow the state agenda, right? They really can't veer too much. It would seem in most places anyway.
and then they end up running up against the same creative problems that their kids run up against, because you have to have the ability to creatively problem solve to have full individuation, right? So your creative problem solving uh, potential is how you manifest your own personality in your own life, right? So diminishing
This
that creates a much more compliant person.
this reminds me of another kind of adage of Taoism and Kung Fu, where the teacher is always reluctant, right? And this is also the same thing with Tahuti and other wisdom teachers. And this is kind of presented in storyline with the Fight Club. Like you're not going to be accepted just because you knock on the door. You have to be rejected numerous times, and then, all right, we're just playing. You're cool. Um,
Right.
and I feel like there's a level of that in finding a good teacher, right? But
If they
the
really want kids to be creative in schools, as the buses arrive, all the doors should be locked.
mm, or one day they're locked and one day a different door is locked, and you gotta like to really get those dendrites sparking is not through day-to-day regularity. It's actually through, wait, what's going on today? The door's locked. It's a today we can't go down this street, we have to walk that way. Whatever it may be, it's just a different change of things, and then you start to get those dendrites growing.
Well, a prize of great reward is often comes with the great cost, right? So if there's no personal investment in the learning process, in how do I get into class, right? Like these are the things that you see with all the great teachers, but instead it's more like, how do I impose my will on the children? You
And
know?
it's the feeling too, resulting from triumph over confusion or fear or any number of negativity, the negative feelings at the time, and you get past it. The teacher, the little allegory I was just going to say, the teacher takes on the young student, and the first thing he does is stuff the kid into a sack, and in the sack is a snake and a bunch of insects and a mouse and all these like really uncomfortable little creatures that could maybe hurt you a tiny little bit, but they're in the sack too, and they're all dreading fear of their situation as well. And the kid, what does the kid do? Of course the kid freaks out, and eventually, and the idea is that the teacher is observing. Some Darlene mentions the escape room. Yeah, it's an escape room in the bag, and the teacher observes, what does the kid do? Does the kid kill all the animals? Does the kid realize that if he just calms down, then all the animals will calm down and there will be no more drama? What how does one deal with the situation?
Exactly. And Having the ability to start to manifest certain ideas on your own is what a true teacher is there to do. He's there to guide you to your own path instead of forcing you into a path that he chooses for you. So this actually brings me to my next topic, which was Celsus. So let me go over the history of Celsus real quick, and then we can get into it. Um, Here we go. Let's switch to this tab instead, and throw that up on the stage. Wrong one. So Celsus is one of the second century critics of Christianity. He wrote a book called The True Word. So Celsus was a second century Greek philosopher and major critic of Christianity, known for his work, The True Word, 175 to 180 AD. He attacked Christianity as a superstitious, politically subversive threat to the Roman Empire. Boy, they didn't listen to him, did they? Criticizing the virgin birth, Jesus' divinity, and the faith's popularity among the uneducated class. That's really what he was going for. So he says, Celsus accused Jesus of fabricating his virgin birth and being a magician rather than a god, allegedly born from a poor woman who was cast away by a carpenter. He viewed Christianity as a divisive force that broke away from traditional pagan worship, threatened the unity of the Roman world. Attraction to the ignorant. Celsus argued that Christianity appealed mainly to the uneducated lower classes. Now, in some ways, you could say, well, that's they were trying to do their best to educate them. He actually puts it the opposite way. So in The True Word, he says, Christians, needless to say, utterly detest one another. They slander each other constantly with the vilest forms of abuse and cannot come to any sort of agreement in their own teaching. Each sect brands its own, fills the head with their own deceitful nonsense. So he's talking about the different denominations of Christianity constantly warring with each other. And he saw this in the second century AD. He says that this is one of the Christians' rules. Let no man that is learned, wise, or prudent come amongst us. If they be unlearned, or a child, or an idiot, let him freely come. So they openly declare that no one but the ignorant and those devoid of understanding, slaves, women, and children, are fit disciples for the God they worship. So Celsus is saying this in the second century in how they want to impose. And this is the difference between zealotry and true religious pursuits, is that zealotry is trying to target the ignorant. Zealotry is trying to radicalize the stupid. And when you've radicalized the stupid effectively, you can have a massive effect on society, because now all they know is what you've told them. All they know is what you've imposed on them. And this is one of the things that I found in my own, experiences, was that Christian Sunday school targeted children under 5 with these stories from the Bible, so that this would be imprinted on them for the rest of their lives. They said Christian salvation drops dramatically after age 5. And this was something that was taught to other Sunday school teachers, so that they had to get there before an age when they understood that, Santa Claus is not possible, So a lot of what we see as being this sort of imposed superstition comes from early life imprinting on children that are, told that this is the way that we have to live. And in a lot of ways, our education system is a perfect mirror of that same type of mentality, where instead of increasing the creative potential from a young age, they are decreasing it by imposing superstition.
Yeah, it's I think one of the worst slogans is "I don't care," and another horrible thought is "either or." However one follows the sentiment of either or is always bad, and politics is often based on either or, and monotheism actually sometimes it's not verbalized in this sense of either or, but the lesson of the young person learning that there is a way to salvation, one way, and it's the way, that really in makes it so that either you're doing that one wayism, or you're a heathen or a god. All these really wild, beyond racial constructs. You're the either then, right? If you're not the one true, you're the otherwise. So it's like this in instilling of divisiveness all throughout it.
I would say from the level of top-down teaching, the most beneficial words that you could use is "I don't care" and "either or." Because if you're teaching from the top down and they're like, "How do I do this?" I don't care. Just do it. Make
Right.
it happen.
It,
Let's see the
it's
creative
it's
potential.
it's a good point that it can be used for diabolical means in really effective manner, right? That's what you're saying anyway.
Well, from the top down, if you're giving the kids a task and then you tell them, "I don't care how you do it," it opens up the creative potential. If they're
Or
saying,
I would say, but it doesn't matter how you do it. You do it how you want it. Could be the same inference without, because the I don't care. It just I like the sentiment sometimes it can be used as you're
from the
pointing out.
bottom up, from the
As you're
bottom
pointing out,
up, it's like, I don't care about what's happening in the world. They're just going to do whatever they do. Right.
well
So from
that's
the bottom up, that's a problem. But from the
well
top
I think
down, actually, it's beneficial.
I think that is actually the top down lesson, is to say, I don't care, what can I do about it. In fact, the power of groups of people to do things about things is really significant, of course. Um, and so I think that belittles our power when we have this notion, which adolescents are the most likely to say it, right? That, oh, I don't care, I can't do anything about it. It's like the reinforcement of apathy in a way. But you're right,
Right.
it is a tool for, in the sense that it doesn't matter, and sometimes it's difficult not to care, and we could care less in this world where information from across the world, not even 100 miles from us, is very upsetting. It could be horrible.
Right. Well, the indifference of the creator is something that is a big struggle within Christianity. They're like, how could you say all of this would be built and designed, and then the creator wouldn't care what you do with it? Right. This is like, nature has sort of an indifference to whatever you plan on doing. I don't, I don't care. Just do it.
Sure. Sure.
Because there is that mutual, I guess, observation that is happening when it comes to learning, right? So when you're looking at a thing, at an object, your impression on the inside, that object doesn't care about, right? But there is a linkage between your observation and the object. So your response is not predicated by the thing itself. And this is, it goes, I think, to the heart of epistemology is, how do we know what we know? Well, we do that because of our response to the thing out there. So the observation, the experimentation, those are all secondary to the original observation itself. And understanding that as the epistemological framework of the universe really does start to change how we view knowledge in the first place. It's a reciprocal cycle of knowledge, understanding, experimentation. There's this constant cycle or the flow between those two things. What does that rock become? Does it become a wheel? Does it become a work of art? That's up to you. But the original observation, that's the key that unlocks all of that potential. And if you don't have that creative spark that gives you all of these different options and all of these different branching trees of possibility, how does that thing become the other thing? It can only be one thing, whatever you're told it is.
And the the branches of a tree, they go by way of their orientation on the planet relative to the elements. And that is what sets their alignment. Sometimes a tree will just be like this on the coast or whatever in a wind zone, right? And that's its proper alignment for its existence. Mostly a tree that's not exposed to wind, it doesn't have that necessarily that problem. Other trees, say in Sedona, they're working sometimes in a spiraling fashion to adjust for some energy too. So that uh, what I was going to bring today is about the tree. So it's making me think more about the tree.
I want to hear about it.
Let's. I got a couple of pictures that are or little helpful ideas here. So first, I just wanted to point out, and again, something I was thinking about, and I mentioned earlier, um, uh, that in kind of digging many holes for a well there's a Tibetan expression, you don't need to dig many holes for a well. And sometimes it's actually helpful to dig multiple holes for what you're digging into, right? And I mentioned the thief idea, where this Chinese adage kind of helps understand potentially what they mean by way of the uh, Tahuti, or rather Hermes, being related to the thief. So here, the four worlds, of course, of the Kabbalah, they're often presented in different um, uh, words. I like to the emanation idea is pretty consistent. I like the fabrication, formation, and action. But here we see a different kind of presentation. But the main idea is that from the most subtle and unrecognizable to us in the material realm is where everything in existence um, originates, right? Um, so uh, the four worlds of the Kabbalah, of course, related to the Tetragrammaton and the four elements, and so on. And I, not too recently, but some time ago, found the Tibetans. I found a Tibetan story that is just so beautiful, related to the four dimensions of creation, if you will. That it's really striking. So I wanted to just share that real quick. But also, it's worth knowing, the Tibetans, they have no fiction. They have myth, of course, as we see in the four harmonious friends, as I'm about to share. But they don't have fiction. It's nonfiction, or it's not worth much, except mythology for one might say moral and inspirational lessons. Um, so the four harmonious friends, or animals, um, uh, take place in the setting of a tree, right? And there is the monkey, the bird. Here it's a seems to be a chicken, but I've seen it be other. Um, Oh, well, these are a different set of four. Interesting. Okay, so it can be even a different set of four here. Here we see the elephant at the base, and the monkey, and there is a bird, and that's a bunny. Should be a bunny rabbit. Here we go. Here's a more classical reference to it. So the four harmonious friends, they all exist relative to and dependent on this tree, because it bears fruit, and that's and they all eat the fruit in different parts of the tree. Um, and one day they have an argument of who, in fact, is responsible for the tree and whose tree it is. And the elephant says, I've been around this tree uh, since it was first dropping fruit. Um, and the elephant and the monkey says, I've been around this tree since it first had branches. And the bunny rabbit says, well, I was here when it first had roots. Rabbits dig holes amongst the roots that kind of offer more water and places for water to fill up and so forth. And the bird says, my friends, I was here when there was no tree and dropped the seed for the tree. And so the most subtle force is the most responsible for its creation, right? And it's also the seed or the point, in reference to the Tetragrammaton, which kind of illustrates sacred geometry in and of itself. If you look up in the Bible, there's a glossary. What is Tetragrammaton? It's equivalent to Lord or God. So what is Lord or God? The Tetragrammaton, and it's a four-dimensional kind of sacred geometry formation that I
The
think
four-letter
is
word.
well, I think like pentagram would be a 5-letter aspect. So tetragram would be a 4-letter aspect. I think aton, the suffix, is equivalent to ation, which is, we don't have grammation in English, we have grammar. So I think it really is saying for grammar. And it's essentially the for grammar, in my understanding, is essentially a way to understand processes and steps towards self-development, and certain symbols have this. All three, as I just shared. And so the four harmonious friends from Tibet, I think, is just a beautiful little adage that kind of depicts, again, the tree of life, this formation from the most subtle.
Right. So with Yeshua, that would be the 5-letter word. And with Yahweh, that's the 4-letter word. So it's like the completion. One is the completion of the other. And it's funny because Yeshua means Yahweh saves. So Yeshua and Yahweh are, very numerically linked in that way.
Absolutely. And the 4 and the 5 too are symbolically constant, as in Buddhism they kind of put forth the same idea, that there's the 4 and then the 5th is the active that activates the 4, as with our hands, and as with that sentiment of Yahshua and Yahweh. What does the 5th do? It acts, it saves. It's the one that gets the movement going and the action.
It's the formation of the fractal from the two poles, right? So the polarity of duality creates death, as they constantly talk about with the number 4. It's like, that's the completion. It's over. And then you add the 5th, and then it becomes a fractal of repeating patterns over and over again.
And I think this is the same reason why they call the 7-note musical system being based on octaves, because it's the 7 plus the next formation.
Right.
It's the next one.
And it's funny how late fractal geometry really comes into play in the Western world, right? So
yeah.
This is the Mandelbrot set, where he's creating this algorithm to create fractaline patterns. And so that Mandelbrot set is, this is 1970s. Let me look that up real quick. But it's so important to understanding how self-generating environments and AI works is through these different Mandelbrot algorithms that then create these other formulations based upon the simple introduction of mathematics into a system. So let me pull that up. But the
Let me say
Mandelbrot,
real quick, I've been looking into the sacred geometry of Plato, inspired by Nick's Plato videos and our discussion on Plato. You were at that, I believe, too, and inspired also by your knowledge of the Greek philosophy and pantheon. I've been looking into the sacred geometry of Plato, and one thing I was just reading yesterday or the day before or something is in relative to the divided line. Socrates and Glaucon, I think, are talking about proportion and morality and goodness and enlightenment. And essentially the dialogue goes, do you think we should be in disproportion with the higher or in proportion? And he goes, Glaucon, of course, proportion. So it reminds me of this fractal sacred geometry anyway, in the idea.
right. So when it comes to the proportion, that's all about ratio. And when you're talking about the ratio, that's, again, all of these different things can be divided down into the harmonious numbers that produce a resonance tone with the original. And that resonance tone with the original would really go into the Platonic idea of this monochord with the sacred. And even in the Platonic philosophers later on, they considered it a golden thread going all the way back to Plato, right? So when they were kicked out of their home in the academy, right? This 1,000-year long school that was destroyed around the 5th century. They felt like this was the breaking of that golden cord going all the way back to Plato. So that exodus felt like that was the end of it. But you can see how influential Plato and his philosophy are, even through all of these different years. And you have the phrase, "All of philosophy is just a footnote to Plato." Well, all of Plato was just a footnote to Parmenides. So,
yeah, good one.
Really, if you really want to get into it, the origin of ontology is really what sparked all of this stuff, because ontology represents that first kind of philosophical enunciation of self-awareness. And, it's on the nature of beingness. So I think in some ways, when you incorporate all of this different mathematics into beingness, that's where you get the what's his name, Pythagorean numbers, right? Where they're assigning meaning to different numbers in their proportion to each other. Oh, excuse me.
In their bug out on this. Whenever I see, well, I'll just say first that I've been listening to this guy that teaches on Comet online, and one of the things that he said was, whenever you see Ra or Re in the front of a word, it's basically extolling Ra, Ray. Like light ray, that's Ra. The different ways we might pronounce it are different. And ratio is another one. And two ones that are really bugged out. Ra is the symbolic for repetition. There's another, whenever you see the re, so ra Pete, right? Because he rises and sets as the sun, right? And so what are the two words that actually say this very idea? Raise and raise. You raise something to the ground is when you bring it down. You get a raise when you rise up. It's like, why those two words do my head in. Also, something
What about Ra Dios?
What is that? radius, yeah, and ratio. Yeah, it's and yeah, right. There's the Dios. There's the two gods in there, huh? Good one.
It's the
Um, I,
circumpunct. It's the
right.
circumpunct. Ra Dios.
I got something here that has the ratio um, from ancient Egypt, and I've been trying to figure more about this, but it's not. It's a little bit above my head. But is that coming through?
Yeah.
Yeah. The so this is really interesting because it starts at a hole, you could imagine, and goes downward into fractions that end up with the 1/64th part. And this the eye of Ra here is depicting how much of our total information input is from what. And the biggest sensation is uh, from our nose, from smell, as they put forth here. But it's really interesting in contrast to this having the 7 1/8 part. It goes to, if you measure these parts and add them up, it's 63/64. It adds up to. So it's missing the capstone kind of thing. It's missing a part. Or like when Osiris is killed, he's missing a part, right? When he comes back. Um,
Indeed.
and it
And they try to
also,
say this is about grain, right? So they're like, this
this
is
is
about
used
grain.
as a, yeah, right, well, right. And well, there's your exoteric,
Right.
right? Is it actually is a way to measure um, grain or different substances. And but the esoteric is that it is a measurement of consciousness and a lot more from that, I suspect. And it's interesting that the Bagua, it goes from 1 to 64, right? Not into 64ths in this arrangement, but it goes in the exact same formation: 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 to 32 to 64. So, and I mean, this is all, you know, potentially, um, uh, what's his name? Terence McKenna researched the I Ching quite deeply in its numerology, and he put forth that the eight of the eight Bagua is similar to the main proteins that humans need, and kind of he had a whole biological correspondence as well as the psychic. Of course, the Bagua and the 64 trigrams being used for the I Ching, and one of the oldest divination processes, really.
Well, I think
So,
this brings up attention and intention again,
hmm,
right? So the eye is how you put out your attention. And if these are the different percentages of attention you give these different senses, right? So above your eye, I guess that would be the divine senses that holds 1/8 of your attention, right? The what you see should only encompass about 1/4 of your attention. What goes on between your eyes, what how you think, the I guess logic would be half of your attention. So half of your attention should be placed on how you reason things out. And then the outer world or your outer circle of people, I guess, would be your 1/6 of your attention. And I'm not sure what the under spiral would be, but and essentially, all of these different senses would be how you perceive the world around you. So your attention should be divided up in this sort of ratiomatic way. so that you can have the fullness of life and complete the system. But isn't the 64 trigrams, that's the Bagua, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, I think the 64.
There's this one. I got another page, and this happens to be a government. They're probably going to shut it down. They'll turn this this one off here after I share it. This is on. Forgive my slow sharing here. This is on the Institute of Health website. Straight government website. It breaks down. We can see another example of how modern medicine is inspired by Egyptian medicine, right? It breaks down. Is that coming through?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it breaks down this whole eye construct in a very factual and fact of the matter esoteric idea, right? But it can get really deep and really profound, right? There's the correspondence with how the brain hemispheres might look compared to the eye. It's really funny that this whatever website it is, NIH National Institute of Health.gov has all this. So again, I mean, I'm sure that there are deeper websites, but they lay it out pretty good right here. So yeah, super.
We know that the whole idea behind the I guess the Egyptian way of perceiving the world was broken down into ratios. So if the Eye of Horus is related to that, then it would make sense why they would be basing all of their ratios on the symbol. If they're conducting the type of dissection to see this stuff, they would say the very center is where everything would originate from, and then they sort of create the kind of ratiomatic model of existence based off of this, which isn't entirely false because everything else has ratiomatic existence. Everything exists in a ratio to everything else. That will go back into what we were saying about the epistemology, right? The ratio of your attention to the object in question allows for an understanding and an experiment, right? So you act in ratio to the things around you, which creates the knowledge. Very interesting. But
yeah,
we're also part of the universe, right? Which means that everything is one thing in ratio to everything else.
Right.
I know. I feel like we've come upon right when it's the proper ratio.
Yeah.
And so proper ratio creates harmony.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think we are, I think we're back to the beginning again. Don't we usually stop once we do that?
Yeah, this has been fire. So yeah, awesome.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you again for another Trilog next week. Hopefully we can get Ricardo back here so we can learn an update about what is going on with all of this Wisconsin float copper and all of these different things. Thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you again next time.